Now to talk more about it, Republican strategist John Seaton. He worked on the presidential campaigns for Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and George Bush. Immature, maybe, right, how we're behaving, but this is important stuff that we're dealing with. Welcome to you, John. Some Republicans are worried whoever succeeds McCarthy will be so beholden to this small group of Republicans that nothing is going to actually get done. And as Jordan said, bring the team together.
It's a huge problem, and the conference right now seems almost at the mercy of around 8 kind of rogue members who, when siding with Democrats, when you have a small majority, can really cause chaos. And I think that what a lot of my Republican friends on Capitol Hill and elsewhere are really frustrated by, this week, is that it would be one thing if there was a plan to remove Speaker McCarthy replace him with someone else with a real plan to govern and to run the House and see Congress move forward. That just doesn't seem to be the case here. There was no plan. There was no what's next, as my old boss Lindsey Graham used to say. It's like the dog that caught the car.
Right. So we'll talk about McCarthy in a moment and what happens to him moving forward. But the task at hand is the House needs a speaker, right? We need a Speaker of the House. So Steve Scalise, Jim Jordan, do either of these Republicans have the trust of the party? Can they coalesce the conference?
Well, I think that Leader Scalise, just by virtue of putting himself before the conference in the past, has received the votes of many of his colleagues, might be seen as a slight front runner right now. But both of these men are going to have a lot of work to do to cobble together the votes that they need, not just to win a majority of the conference, but then to go to the floor and get 218 votes to become speaker. So yeah, I don't think anyone has this thing locked up, not by a long shot at this point. It's going to be a very interesting week, as you mentioned. Congress is in recess, and I'm guessing both these men and their supporters are going to be feverishly working the phones in between town hall meetings and meeting with constituents to gauge the support of their colleagues.
I throw this out, although it is highly unlikely that former President Trump becomes Speaker of the House, but a member of the House does not need to be a member in order to be Speaker. But Marjorie Taylor Greene says, I'd like to see Trump become Speaker. In response, he said, my focus is on the presidency in 2024. So you've got this fodder going back and forth, John, and then you've got the Rule 26 that is trending on X right now. Yeah. A member of the Republican leadership shall step aside if indicted for a felony for which a sentence of 2 or more years imprisonment may be imposed. What's your take on this conversation and the likelihood that Trump even would want this position given what he's facing?
Yeah, as you noted, he's made it pretty clear he's not interested. I think there's in some circles amongst Republican primary voters in particular, there's really no downside to invoking the former president and proclaiming your support. Look, it's a conference rule. If the conference really strongly wanted former President Trump to be their leader and the Speaker of the House, they could always change the rules. But I don't see that happening. I think it's been kind of interesting chatter, but I don't see that being a reality.
Right, and I tend to agree with you. However, the question may be that's more important: how much influence does he have over who does become Speaker?
Right, and it was interesting that he kind of stayed out of the motion to vacate, did not express his support for Speaker McCarthy, who had always been very supportive of him. If he does put his finger on the scale, first of all, I think it's anyone's guess which way he'd go, and he would have influence with when this thing is going to be as close, I think, as it could be in the conference. Every endorsement could matter. Certainly his, as he's shown, does carry a good bit of weight.
Nationwide, as we head into a very important election, what does this mean for Republicans' ability to maintain the majority come 2024 in the House?
Well, again, I think that Republicans in Congress are going to need to decide whether 8 or, a small number of very rogue members are going to dictate policy and dictate leadership. And again, when you look around the House and AOC and the squad are cheering at the end of that motion to vacate, I really think that Republicans need to take a good hard look as to how much influence they're going to give people who really don't seem to be all that interested in governing. So, yeah, I think it's an issue that the rank and file Republicans in Congress are going to need to grapple with. And I think Republicans are hopeful that they'll be able to kind of sideline those who don't seem to be interested in actually being part of any solution.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.